Well, hi everybody, and welcome to the next episode of National Council in Conversation. This episode features the life and work of a remarkable author and teacher and educator in the Arctic called Mindy Willett. And she is there's much to say about cross-cultural storytelling from her life and work in the Northwest Territories. This, I hate to tell you, is actually a re-recording of an initial conversation we had that, due to my technical incompetence, went missing. I inadvertently erased the Zoom recording of our first chat, and we actually begin with me acknowledging Mindy's patience in going forward. Mindy's work has much to say about, and she's a remarkable woman who's had a remarkable life so far. She's in her early 50s, amplifying Northern voices and bringing Indigenous voices into schools. And much of the work that she's been doing is very similar to the kind of work we're doing at the museum. One note before we get into the conversation with Mindy is that she is in her home on Lois Lane in Yellowknife, and I'm here on the Gulf Shore in a little cabin in Nova Scotia. My first time in 2 years. This is my wife Gail's home place and the home province, and we're glad to be here, but the vagaries of rural internet being what they are, we had insufficient bandwidth for two video feeds in this Zoom conversation. So the only sensible way to do that was just to record Mindy's camera and just pick up the audio from the conversation. I do make a little cameo appearance at the end just to say goodbye. But thank you for your support of the museum. Thank you for your interest in National Council in Conversation. And on we go, a conversation with author and educator Mindy Willett.
This is so kind of you to do a redo of this because of my technical incompetence, but it's a chance to catch up. We were just talking before we started recording about your most recent trip to the Northeast Arm. Good times this summer?
Yeah, we had a beautiful 2 weeks in the East Arm. The land is healing as always, and we went with 5 friends. Yeah, it was beautiful. We went on a fishing trawler with this wonderful guy named Sean Buckley. I highly encourage people to look up Sean and get a tow to where you want to go. The stories he told about his life on the lake were amazing. We spent one night near him and watched him set his fish net and pull it in and learn from him and his storytelling. And it was a great way to get to a part of the lake that because there's sections that have very large crossings, we wouldn't paddle over to that side of the lake. So that's what allowed us to get access to some of the islands we don't normally get to see.
Did you check in with the band administrator or anything along the way, or how did that work?
We're actually starting more closely related to the people in Fort Res, and it's along the path towards the people in Kugluktuk, and not quite into their new beautiful park called Nunavut. And I certainly have in previous years called and checked, but because I'd done that in the past and had asked them the protocols for being on their land, I didn't do it this summer.
I have another just question. Mr. Buckley, the captain, is he a son or a grandson of Archie Buckley, who ran the fish plant in Yellowknife?
Archie is his uncle. Yeah, and all family relations. And we learned a lot about his family and his mother. It was right after the discovery for some people, but of course it was known to everyone here about all of the unmarked graves across Canada from residential schools. And So we talked a lot about those children and Canada.
There's nothing like being on a boat chugging through a beautiful country on an open sea to have a chat. It's a bit like a canoe some days.
Yeah, it was a beautiful way to start a trip. And like I said, Sean has a business there. So if people are interested, you can get in touch with Sean to have a tow out to part of the lake.
I am delighted to speak with you, delighted to have you on the National Council. And of the many things you bring to the National Council, Mindy, is a real cross-cultural sensibility and the work that you're doing. But listen, also belated congratulations. You've been writing for years, but the 2020 Northwards Prize went to you in the COVID time, sadly, but for sharing our truths.
Firstly, I just want to point out that I co-wrote that with Henry and Eileen Beaver. So the big shout out to them, because it's their story, their words, their family, their community. And our shared prize, it was a little bit, we didn't get to go to there in Fort Smith, and there was no, big event or anything, but it was still special for us. And we had our own little Zoom meeting.
For people who don't know your work, can you say a little bit about where it came from and this amazing, where this sort of the genesis of this amazing series?
I was very fortunate to be a teacher in Kugluktuk, Nunavut. It was Coppermine NWT then. It's like about 25 years ago now. And at that time, which it's really great to say isn't true anymore, but at that time, there were very, very few storybooks, nonfiction or fiction, written for and about and by Indigenous people. And the students in my class asked me, why don't we have any beautiful books about us? I'm a social studies teacher. There were books, from kids in Africa or China, all across Canada, non-Indigenous children, but very few with Indigenous children. And where they were, it would be, a child in a parka just standing there, and it would say Inuk in parka, no name, no understanding that the kids are playing soccer, playing hockey, or hanging out with their video games, or also going on the land. And so I really tried hard to find books where kids could see themselves. And when I couldn't, I was lucky enough to get some funding to start a series. And so there are 9 official Indigenous languages in the Northwest Territories. And so I worked with a storyteller from each of those language groups to basically be a vehicle so that they can tell their own stories. So they're all co-authored, and they've been an amazing, I think the first one was in 2003. So it's been a long time working with people and building relationships and community here. And I'm very blessed.
Well, so are we for the books. And yes, the world is different now. And I mean, how is it different from your perspective, living and working in Yellowknife?
Well, I'd say when I walk into beautiful Yellowknife bookseller and go to the northern book section, I can pull off so many books by authors from here, like Richard Van Camp or Antoine Mountain, or so many books, and the shelf is full. So of children's books, fiction, nonfiction, and it's I think an exciting time, whether it's music or art or film, writing. The stories from people here are being told and shared by the people of this land. Yeah, and that was hard to find 25 years ago.
Yeah, and in the meantime, in the process of doing your work, you spent time winter and summer. You seemed absolutely fearless. You sent me some lovely photographs of you in action, and it doesn't seem to matter. It's not as if this was sort of any kind of clinical studio situation with you sitting on a couch somewhere. Well, although you did do that in the very nice homes of the people who welcomed you. But can you tell me maybe about a highlight or two of that in the process of doing that work that might intrigue people of what you kind of went through with your process to gather these stories?
It was Julianne's book that I started with because I had a previous relationship with her working with the Gwich'in Tribal Council. They had asked me to work with them on a land use planning teacher's guide. And so I was partnered up with Julianne, and the more I got to know her, the more I was like, hey, your life is amazing. We got to share this. Would you be interested? And she said, sure. So that was the first book. And she took me out trapping with her family and her young twins, and to be in a wall tent. And it was very cold, minus 30. And this was just before, and this tells you how long ago it was, digital cameras. So that book is actually done with slides, if you can believe it, because the photographer, Tessa, she was still using slides, and I was so nervous, like, are their eyes open? Can you tell? You know, because you have to wait till you get back and take the pictures. And so think about how much has changed since then. So Tessa McIntosh did all the photographs, and it also speaks to the importance of relationship, because Tessa's lived in the North for many, many years, and often when we go into a community and people might be, you know, who are you before you build a relationship, but they'd see Tessa and they'd go, oh, hi, and they'd give her a hug, and there was a sense of she's okay, they're going to be using these images respectfully, and so that was really important as well.
I have to circle back though to Julianne and her two daughters, Anime and Amanda. What are they doing now? They must be big and grown. And are you still in touch in any way?
Funny you should just say that. Amanda was here last week. I got a text from her mom saying Amanda's coming through town, and so we went for lunch just last Friday, and she's on her way to Fort Smith. She just started college there. So, and Anime goes to school in Edmonton.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think.
And I was in Sikichik too. Was it just last year? It was during COVID. But no, it was the year before, just before COVID. Now I'm remembering. And we stayed at Julianne's house, and I was working with the language teacher in the classroom, and I stayed with Julianne, and Amanda was there and fed us every day. And she's become quite an amazing chef too. And Julianne was at the time an elected official in the community. That's what she's up to, as well as doing cooking shows on Zoom. So she was selling Tupperware and doing a cooking show from Sikichik. So amazing. Well, but in terms of some highlights, the book I did from Kugluktuk to Uluhaktuk with Darla Ivirotailak was one of my favorites, and for many reasons. One, Darla was a baby in a packing shirt. I met her mother, Doreen, on my very first day as a teacher in Kugluktuk. She was walking across a path and stopped to say hi to me. And that little baby that was in the packing shirt, you know, however many years later, is the co-author of that book. And her parents, grandparents, Joe and Susie, and great-grandparents, Kate and Roy, are really dear friends of mine. And I've learned so much about reciprocity and relationships from building that friendship over the last 25 years. And so skidooing from Kugluktuk to Uluhaktuk, that was not easy, and I learned a ton there. But one memory, the night before we left, I came back from grocery shopping, and Susie had all this big piece of canvas out by the sewing machine. And I said, oh, what are you sewing? And she said, our tent. We need 2 tents. So the night before, she's got a sheet of canvas and she's sewing our tent. This is the resilience and incredible skills of people. But I was like, okay, that's amazing. But she also asked, are you going to eat with us or are you going to bring your own food? And I was like, no, I'm going to eat with you guys. I always eat with you guys. I love country food. And so no problem, except I didn't realize that meant a pretty much raw fish diet, because normally I'd had beautiful caribou soup or whatever was in the house. And so my digestive system was a little challenged, let me say. I wasn't used to eating as much raw fish, and having diarrhea on a trip from Kugluktuk to Kugluktuk where it's flat, and go and try and find a place to hide or privacy when you need to use the washroom. So there was so much going on that trip. And
last time we spoke, I stumbled into a treasure in your house, which is a crooked knife.
Sure, that crooked knife came from Philip Zoe. He's passed away now, from Gamity. And I was very fortunate to work with Philip and his sister-in-law, Therese, on a book in Gamity called Living Stories. And Philip, unilingual elder, so we communicated through gestures and experiences and through Therese translating for us. And the way I ended up working with Philip was through one of your other council members, John Bizot. At that time, I didn't have any relations in the Clincho community, so I went and met with John, and I shared some of the previous books and asked for his advice and whether or not he thought it would be a good idea, or where in the Clincho lands and what story. And it was on John's advice to go and work with Therese and Philip and share a story. He was specific. He wanted the story of Sulkwe. So that's what I did. And over the course of a few years, built a really special relationship with Philip. He was a very traditional man. We walked a lot of his lands and spent a lot of time together. And at first, which I don't blame him, he just kept saying he didn't know the story John had asked me to record. And I'd say, okay, and we'd go and do something else. We went and paddled, we got water, we collected fish, we put up spruce boughs in the wall tent, we built birch bark baskets, we did lots and lots of activities. And one day up on a high ridge, notably when I didn't have my recorder, we'd just been out for a walk, and he said, I'm going to tell you that story now. And so we sat and listened, and over the course of time, heard it quite a few times. And the reason that book took quite a few years to publish was because that story had never been written down before, and some people in the community didn't want that to happen. And so the name of the story doesn't actually exist in that book, but you'll see it now. And John explained it to me in that as the Clincho have signed their self-government agreement, they have more control over their stories, their land, their resources, their way of life. And but some people are still reluctant to trust and to share their stories because perhaps somebody's going to use the story to their own advantage or to make money, and so really needed to sit and listen to people. And so that took quite a while to sit and meet with the community and have permission. And so in the book, you don't actually see a photograph of it either. It looks like a painting. So that was the negotiation of what they wanted to be shared at the time. And so over the course of the time of doing that, then you spend more and more time with Philip, and we became pretty good friends. And before he passed away, he gave me his crooked knife he actually gave it to me to give to my husband, because he said he wasn't going to be around to take care of me anymore. So he needed to give the knife to Damien so Damien could take care of me. It's a very beautiful gift, and I miss him. I miss him a lot.
What a beautiful story, and also what an incredibly loaded example of doing work, cross-cultural work. And the museum, in its collection has probably a third of 600 craft are of Indigenous origin. And we've been working really hard to rethink our collaborative relations with the communities from which the collection originates. But your story of taking the time to, the ultimate irony of when the story is told, you don't have your notebook or your recorder or any of that sort of stuff. Just reflecting on that, in terms of the lessons of your practice that come out of that and other things, as the museum goes forward, what sorts of things have you been watching for as you've been keep riding herd, as it were, on the kinds of things that are happening at the museum?
Well, I certainly don't pretend to think I have it right. One thing I've learned is that I'm constantly learning. I was lucky to be involved in a treaty simulation a couple of weeks ago. I was just an observer listening. It was for students. The Dene Nation was running it with the Walter and Duncan Gordon Foundation. And one of the chiefs on there taught the students a word. It was sile. And he just said, listen. And I think that is one of the things, if I take, and I'm still not very good at it, but just sit and listen first. And that we can't pretend, even if we're both speaking English, there's so much more going on. And sometimes I think I understand, and then I find out later I didn't understand. So listening is super important. And then some people say, and everybody's different, there is no one right way, but if your intent is good and you've listened and you've asked questions, showing respect that way, I think you're more likely to have a good relationship.
Amen. And thank you for that. It's definitely a process to kind of rethink the whole idea of museum. And it's wonderful to have your wisdom and your experience and your voice along with the others on the National Council to guide us along the way. Your daughter Ray has been working before she goes to Trent this fall. You're taking her down to start in there, but she's been working for Camp Wanapitei. And has she taken her mom's advice, and has Wanapitei got protocols in place? And are you comfortable with the kinds of thing they're doing? I know we all probably could do better. And like you, I grew up in neutral territory in Guelph and crossover with the Mohawks. And the only place I ever saw Indigenous people was in books and maybe in the cigar store. I don't know. The world is changing though, but you've mentioned calling ahead and doing those sorts of things. But in terms of the camp and your daughter, are they doing? Have they got protocols in place that you're happy with? Not to put you on the spot, of course.
No, I think it's a really, really important question, and I think camps in particular have a lot to grapple with, their own histories and the ceremonies and practices that are part of camp life, which I was really happy when I went to Wanapitei a couple of summers ago. My son had completed the big long V2 trip, and the presentations that the youth did They acknowledged whose land they were on. One of the trips actually had come through Yellowknife and paddled to Kugluktuk, and they had actually met with John B. ahead of time and learned a ton and were really reflective. One of the young women, Selena, on Jack's trip was from Bear River. Is that what it? On Temagami. And
Bear Island. Sorry,
Bear Island.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I believe I forgot that, from Bear Island, and she had taught the kids about protocol, and so they were all learning from Selena. And yes, this summer, Ray's not actually working for Wanapate. She's doing a V2 trip that was canceled last year because of COVID. And we worked on some maps ahead of time before she left with the Gwich'in Land Use Planning Board, and all the maps are in Gwich'in, and she was learning about the stories. She brought tobacco with her to pay the water, as is protocol here. And yeah, I think the camp is trying. I know that their board is working on that, and again, we all have a lot to learn, but I'm happy to see some progress in that area for sure.
Fantastic. Now, since 2013, in addition to being an author and a paddler and doing all the things you do, a mother and a spouse, you're social studies and Northern Studies coordinator for the GNWT. We're heading back into another school season. You're building curriculum or doing policy. What's on your plate right now, and what's keeping you hopping as we roll through this second COVID summer, headed for a start in September?
I'm very lucky to have a job I love, I have to say that. And one of the projects we're working on is a new course called Northern Studies 20. And we are doing that in partnership with 2 individuals from each of the Indigenous governments. We invited them ahead to pick who they wanted to work on this. And so it's focusing, when we listen to the Indigenous governments right now, most of them have talked about the importance of treaty and land claim, and knowing their treaty or land claim or history, whatever that is, because not everybody has a land claim, and focusing on some of the resource development around that. Of course, this is 2021, which is the 100th anniversary of the signing of the last of the numbered treaties in Canada. And so this has been a very sad weekend, actually, because the Tlincho had many events planned for this weekend, and it was all canceled because of COVID outbreak in the Sawtoo, which our thoughts are very much with the Sawtoo right now, where the communities have incredibly high numbers. They've actually just called in the Red Cross and the military to assist. Yeah, so right now we're working on treaty education in the territory. It's already mandatory in grade 10, but that's for more looking at what is treaty on a more, the whole territory, where and Northern Studies 20 will be more specific with their own land claim or treaty in their area, so the kids can learn more about their community, as we're all treaty people. So Indigenous, non-Indigenous learning here. And the other thing I am really lucky to work on is the Indigenous language revitalization. There's a curriculum called Our Languages, and actually I'm supposed to be going to Betchoko tomorrow to work with 2 new immersion teachers, but there's no more travel in the territory because of the COVID outbreak. So we'll be doing that by Zoom.
Wow. I'm so sorry to hear about the outbreak in the Sawtoo, and nobody's immune, it seems, and everybody's vulnerable, and it's just happening at all sorts of different rates. So, and the 100th anniversary scuppering, yeah, it's so sad, but it is always inspiring to talk to you. I mean, it doesn't seem to matter when we're together. You always have something. I mean, the last time we were together physically, you and your husband Damien were just about to get in the car and drive it up the winter road to stash a canoe at McKay Lake. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And then you flew in later with a smaller plane because the canoes were already in place. And I don't know, was that your Souris River that you looped from McKay Lake back to town on that trip?
Yeah, we took the Souris River on that one. It's only 42 pounds, and Damien gave it to me for my 50th birthday a couple of years ago, so I could still portage a canoe, because from there we were doing Pike's Portage as well, and the ice was crazy that year, so we ended up having to portage over peninsulas and stuff, because we did, I think it was 13 extra portages, so we were very happy to have the lighter boat on that trip. The Fletcher would have been difficult.
But I want to just wind up here, Mindy, with getting something sorted out that is important. You have a Fletcher canoe made by Thelma Cameron. You have a Souris River canoe, and you have some thoughts for anybody who might live in or around Peterborough, who might make the claim that that's the canoe capital of the country or the globe or the galaxy. Well, if I were to ask you, Mindy Willett, what is the canoe capital of Canada, what would your answer be?
Atikokan. Yeah, I was blessed to be raised in Atikokan, which proudly boasts canoe capital of Canada, and I again think the two can live together, those two worlds. And while we're on that note, Atikokan is on Ojibwe territory, and you know, I was raised and never really knew that. Wasn't told that. We didn't really talk about it, and I think we have a lot to learn about as paddlers. I now live on the land of the Yellowknives Dene, Chief Dry Geese territory in the North Slave Métis, and the traditional territory of the Tlinchot, and paddle through a lot of country here in the NWT. And I think all of our experiences are richer if we call ahead, ask, pay attention, research, learn, and the stories of this land and the people whose waters we're traveling through are just so rich. And I think we all have a lot to learn from each other. So I encourage any paddlers, Atikokan or wherever you're from, to seek that out.
The canoe capital of the world, I will totally agree with you, is Atikokan. There is a lot of cool stuff happening in Peterborough with the Canoe Museum. I hope people will keep in touch, and you as well. Lots going on with our new property and our new project. And but you are part of the National Council, and we're so grateful, Mindy, to have you as part of that, because that is also part of the living, breathing new museum. And we really do thank you for lending your name, your likeness, your advice, and to do things like National Council and Conversation. So on behalf of everybody, thank you for all of that. I
obviously care deeply about the Canoe Museum, and the amazing collection that is there. Still, like Barb Cameron said on our last call, wondering what is our place? What can we do to support and to so hopefully others have advice there, because I don't know what the answer to that one is yet.
Well, we're breaking ground, and you're a groundbreaker in some respects with your writing, with the work that you're doing. And I mean, I can't answer that directly, but I do know that it is encouraging and reassuring to those of us who are forging on. Carolyn Heslop, our executive director, and Vicki Grant, our board chair, you know, we're kind of doing our best to chart a course on territory that is not well charted in our experience, yeah, it's just nice knowing that we've got the connection, and keeping the National Council engaged and at these long distances and through COVID is a challenge, and I hope it hasn't been too frustrating for you, but we do appreciate your time. And I know that you'll get a chance to sniff around the museum if you're in Peterborough, and you may have some thoughts, and we'd be glad to hear them.
Okay, must see, Jim.
thank you again for your patience. And my next job is to download this and make 700 copies of it. I'm going to hide all over the place on my disk so that if I do anything stupid again, which I won't, I will have a backup copy.
Thanks, Jim. Nice to see you.
Safe travels.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.